Record, and the hour has drawn nigh. So it's been long enough. So my name is Zev Shantalov. I'll be teaching this class. So I'm going to mute everybody here, get that out of the way, mute all such power as always. Okay. Um, I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to put it on the text. If you have it in front of you, that's great. Follow along in your book. Otherwise, I will have the text always, hopefully, Bezrat Hashem, on the screen. Um, in other classes, I tend to rely heavily on slides besides text, slides because of sources and all. It'll depend on the chapter, what I'll be doing. Like this chapter one, I'm only going to have, I think, one, two slides. That's all. Others, two and three, I'll have quite a few. And where we left off, remember, we gave the whole introduction, what Mishle is, written by Shlomo HaMelech, the very first number of chapters. There aren't these pithy statements that come and really go throughout a large part of Mishle, but we're not coming to that yet. That's going to be a while. Right now, we're going back and forth between the thou shalt nots and thou shalt, so to speak. And when it comes to Musar and ethical teaching, some very few psukim have some halachic ramifications, which the one that's in yellow in front of that we left off with 6-7 years ago before the Chagim. We'll talk about that for a couple of minutes. Some will be a script. So, like for example, here you have some psukim in red. It's actually a script, as it were. We're going to see what that means. And again, for those of you who are saying, well, wait, where are all those nice, cute little statements I always hear from Mishle? It's going to be a while till we get to that. So where we left off was this pasuk that's fairly well known. Shema, besides the fact that it's a song, is Shema b'ni musar avicha. So listen, my son, and listen to or heed, as it says here in English, the musar, the ethics, the discipline of your father. And don't forsake the instruction or the teachings of your mother. But parenthetically, I want to mention one thing. The word Torah doesn't just mean the Torah that we're talking about. It also means a set of rules. Lahorot means to teach. It is the same shoresh as hore, parent, as more, teacher. They're all connected. That's just a side point right now. But I want to talk about for a couple of minutes, what does this pasuk mean? And by the way, when we go through the Sefer, especially in the first few chapters, we're not going to drill down every single pasuk. Some will have a little bit more information than others that we'll have to spend more time on than others. And this is going to be one of them. You'll notice there are two verbs here: to listen to the ethics of your father, and to not forsake the teaching, the Torah, the instruction of your mother. So we have to understand, first of all, who are we talking about? So on the surface, we're talking about parents, obviously, your physical mother and father. One is not to negate the other. It's not like, okay, so for your father, you get the musar, you get the ethical teaching, and for your mother, you get your Torah. It doesn't mean that. It means even the opposite. Matter of fact, you'll maybe get musar from your mother, but your mother's teaching of Torah and the instruction your mother may give you is also something you shouldn't divert away from, and vice versa. Interestingly enough, Rashi tells us that the mother and the father here are not our physical parents. Avicha is Avinu Shabbat meaning Hashem, and the Ima is from the word Uma. Uma means nation, which refers to the rabbinic enactments or those things that we say are dirabanan. So it's saying in one pasuk according to Rashi, and I'm sure many of you have heard the statement, oh, it's only dirabanan. It's only the rabbi said that. So no, I mean, the level of dirabanan has certain ramifications versus things that are min haTorah or midoraita. Nevertheless, you still have to follow both. Okay, that's a comment from Rashi. Also, the word Shema, we know that has at least three connotations. Number one means to listen, physical hearing. It also can mean to understand, to inculcate something into your neshama, into your heart, and also obey. We have in this week's parasha, last week's parasha, where he says, Shema'an koli, listen to my voice. So what does that mean? It means obey what I'm telling you, listen to what I'm telling you, inculcate all these meanings here. Same thing is true when we talk about Shema Yisrael, Shem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. But this pasuk has halachic ramifications as well. So let's take a look at a Gemara. Um, let's say you are Ashkenazi and you don't eat kitniot on Pesach. Let's say that you are Ashkenazi and you have a certain direction that you shake the lulav in. Let's say you're Sfaradi and you don't make a bracha on halal when it's half halal. Let's say, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are minhagim. The minhag of Ashkenazim would be X. Minhag of Ashkenazim would be, of Sfaradim would be Y. Why do we have to follow it? Just because it's a minhag, right? So let's take a look at this Gemara in Psachim. This is one of the sources for this concept of what is this pasuk also teaching us. Bnei Baishan, which is the city of Beit Shan. Bnei Baishan, nahug de lahave azlin mitzor letzidon b'male shabta. It was their custom, people from Beit Shan, their custom was on Erev Shabbat, they wouldn't go in a boat from Tzur to Sidon in Lebanon. It's not that long a ride or a boat ride, but they wouldn't go because which reason they'd be going is they were businessmen and they would go to a fair and they would be able to buy stuff. But they say, you know what, on Erev Shabbat, we're not going to do it. Why? Because we could run into trouble and not get back in time for Shabbat. The next generation came to their rabbis and said, Ato benaihu kamei de Rabbi Yochanan. Their children, now that they've grown up and they're also in the business, went to Rabbi Yochanan, who was evidently what's called the Mar De'atra, the rabbi of the community, Amrulo, and they said to him, Avhatayin efshar lahu. Our fathers were able to do that, meaning they were able to skip going to the Yerid, the fair on Friday, because they had plenty of money. They didn't have to worry about making business deals. We can't live by that. We can't, meaning they're asking for permission to do something different than was the custom that was accepted by all their parents or their fathers, which was that at Erev Shabbat, you don't go this distance because you may run into trouble with Shabbat. So that he responds, so Rabbi Yochanan says, Amar lahu, so Rabbi Yochanan answered, sorry, Charlie, your forefathers already accepted it upon you, on them, on all of you. Why? For it says, Shema b'ni musar avicha v'al titosh torati mecha. The Gemara tells us something amazing, which is that when we talk about a family minhag, a community minhag, a minhag of Sfaradim, a minhag of Ashkenazim, you can't just throw it away. It has to be taken into consideration, and there has to be a darn good reason why you're doing it. I'll give you an example. Let's say somebody keeps 6 hours between chalavim b'sari. By the way, there are about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 different opinions as to what the time period between b'sari and chalavi is. At least 6, if not more, probably more. But let's just go with the 6 right now. You wait 6 hours. And I decide one day, you know what? I'm going to go to 3 hours. 6 hours is a long time. You can't just stop. Because al titosh torati mecha, it falls under the category. You can't just change your custom like that. There has to be a reason. I'll give you an example. I know of somebody who was keeping 3 hours. They were not religious. They started keeping 3 hours for a number of years. And one of their rabbis, who wasn't really his real rabbi, made some kind of offhanded comment to him once. What are you not maretz? What are you not pikorish? You should wait 6 hours. So he didn't know any difference. So he started to wait 6 hours, even though already for a number of years he'd been waiting 3 hours. So his son and grandson, they wanted to change the minhag because they felt that their father had accepted something that was not accept. It wasn't really what he understood he was accepting. So we talked about it and eventually told me to wait for 3 hours. But unless there's a good reason, that someone might say to me, "Oh, I know Chandler, but I'll call him up before Pesach." And I'm going to ask him, "Do I have to eat kitniot? Or can I eat kitniot?" He's going to say, "Yes, of course you can." The answer is no. I'm not going to say it so fast. There has to be a really good reason why you want to be able to change to be eating kitniot if you're Ashkenazi. It doesn't just, even though that goes against everything, I would love to say, go ahead. Now, one other point, and I will not be doing this every single pasuk, but this has halachic issues that really is worth spending a couple minutes on. If a person comes from a background that their father, specifically we're talking about the father right now, was not religious, meaning there's no Masorah. The father didn't keep kosher, the father didn't keep Shabbat, there is no waiting between B'sari and Chalavi. The child who is being raised and becomes religious may choose their custom. So if Joe Schmo's father was not religious, now Joe Schmo at the age of 18 went to yeshiva, started to learn. He says, okay, you know what, I'm going to become religious. He does not have to, because he's Ashkenazi, necessarily keep a full 6 hours. He may adopt a certain approach. He may even adopt the Sfaradi versus Ashkenazi. There's a lot of leeway because Shema b'ni musar avicha al titosh Torah timecha. There is no Torah timecha. There is no, the Torah timecha is to not keep Shabbat. The Torah timecha is to not keep kosher. Obviously, you don't do that. So therefore, there's a lot of leeway in some in families like that. Okay. Now, having said that, where we're supposed to make sure we follow the tradition, we follow minhagim, meaning customs and everything else. The Shlomo Melech continues, Ki livyatchen hem liroshecha v'anakim lagargarotecha, meaning they're an adornment of grace for your head and chains for your neck. What does that mean? What is this talking about? A person who goes, let's use an example of a woman who decides they're going to go to a fancy party, a wedding, of something nicer, or just they're going to want to dress up a little bit. Instead of wearing maybe they're just on the earrings and maybe a ring, they'll put on maybe a necklace and add some other adornment, other jewelry, or if you're a Chicago alderman, a pinky ring. Sorry, just kind of put that in there. Why? What does that do? Because you're enveloping yourself in something that's more graceful, more beauty, upgrading. So here the pasuk is really telling us that the musar, the ethical approach to Torah, the Torah itself, it are actually adornments. And you especially wear your heart on your sleeve, but in a sense you're wearing your Torah on your sleeve, that you are visibly someone shomer Torah and mitzvot. That itself is a form of an adornment. Interestingly enough, if you'll notice this word, I'm not going to spend time at legagirotecha. It means your throats. It's plural. So there's a comment in Malbim, I think, says that because you have the trachea and you have the windpipe and the food pipe coming down, trachea and esophagus, that's why it refers to as your neck. Another possibility is that they're the rings around the esophagus, but again, that doesn't affect us at the moment. Now, as an introduction, so now Shlomo Melech said, look, you got to pay attention to your Masorah, you got to wear them, you got to be proud of your heritage, is what these first two psukim in the middle of the parak mean. And now he says, okay, dude, I know what I just told you, it's really important, but if you lived in a perfect world, it'd be simple. We don't live in a perfect world. So Shlomo says as follows, Bini, my son, imifatucha chataim al toveh. If sinners entice you, don't give in, don't yield, don't right away jump to what they're trying to tell you to do. But I'm going to go back. Something just popped in my head. I forgot I wanted to mention in this last pasuk. When it talks about the rosh, the head, and the throat. What do we do with our head? We think. And what do we do with our throat? Besides eat and breathe, we speak. So also it's telling us that when we do follow the Torah, when we do keep the ethics and the minhagim and everything else and halachot, that we should not be echad b'peh v'echad b'lev, that we shouldn't be a person who is compromises on our values, that we say one thing, but we do another. I tell you, keep Shabbat, keep Shabbat, keep Shabbat, but I don't keep Shabbat. Keep kosher and I don't keep kosher. So our rosh in our throat, meaning our voice, in our head, our mind, who we are, should be the same. So let's continue. So now again is this introductory statement to the next few psukim. Shlomo's warning us that I've given you some nice idea, but you also have to take in consideration that we're living in the real world. And in the real world, people are not always the nicest. And we have to be aware. If a person is going to go to a city they don't know the neighborhood, it's always a good idea to know where you're going to go, because what if you're in a bad area? What if you end up somewhere you shouldn't be? You need to know. What if the people aren't so good? What if the people are very nice? You want to be you want to be always surrounding yourself with good people. But again, it's not normal that everyone's going to be around nice people. We all have people who may come into our lives that are not nice. And what are they going to do? I'm going to read a few psukim before we go into them. This is going to kind of like a script that Shlomo HaMelech writes and puts into the mouth of some bad people, and they actually are trying to entice you or me to do things. I'm just going to read and translate to start. If they say to you, let's go, let's set an ambush to kill somebody. Let's lie in wait for someone who's innocent. Nivlaem ki sheol chayim, like Sheol, which is Gehenna, hell. We're going to swallow them alive. Utmimim ki ordei, and whole people who will go down into the pit. We're going to see what this word means, tmimim, in this case, because it really means the opposite of what it usually does. Kolhon yakar nimtza. These bad people are going to say to you, we could get every kind of precious treasure. We're going to take them for everything. Nimaleva shala. We're going to fill our whole house with with treasures that we get from them. Goralcha talpil b'tochenu. You know what you should do? Throw your lot in with us. We got you covered. Kisachad yelechulanu. That means what's say here? We have a common purse. It's a common cause. We're all going to be in this together. So now they gave this script. Let's see what he's talking about here. Shlomo's telling us we have to be on our guard. Now, I don't know about you, but in my almost 67 years, no one's ever said to me, hey, you know what would be a good idea? Let's go kill somebody. When I was in high school, my senior year, I wrote one of the things I'm most proud of in my life in the non-Torah world. I did a paper, was a high school research paper that ended up being used by my teacher in college to teach how to write a paper, which was pretty cool. And I actually still have it, and I have his comments still. I mean, the paper. And I did a paper on Leopold and Loeb murder of a boy named Bobby Franks in Chicago. It was crowned the crime of the century. They almost got away with the perfect murder. And the only reason they wanted to murder somebody, these were two rich Jewish boys who were privileged, who killed another Jewish boy who was 14 years old. And they only wanted to do it for the thrill. They want to see if they can get away with it. There was no purpose. Now, that's very different than this, but that's the only thing I can think of in my whole life I've ever encountered that said okay, we're just going to kill. So what does this mean here? Starting off, maybe say, you know what would be a good idea? No one's going to be at the Makolet between 2 and 3. Let's just go in and rob the place. That makes more sense. What is this business when this person's going to come? Shlomo Melch's trying to warn us. It's pretty far-fetched that anybody's ever going to really say that to us. So Malbim tells us that he begins off with this heinous crime, this idea of trying to tell us to commit murder, because even a child, whether a child in years or in knowledge, in bagrut, in maturity, understands that you don't kill. Even they understand that. And just as that is so obvious, you should never give it to. You shouldn't even give it to the other things that are about to be listed. To entice somebody, you don't need to tell them to do the deed. You don't have to tell them, come, let's kill. That's not what it says. It says, l'chayitanu, go with us, and we're going to ambush somebody and to shed their blood. Not that we're going to do it. We'll lie in wait. You're going to be like an accessory. Big deal, right? No big deal. First of all, why are they going to want to do this in the first place? Because they're going to want to corrupt you. What should be running through your head at that time? First of all, common sense. We don't kill, we don't steal, we don't rob, we don't wait in ambush people. That's first of all. Rabbeinu Yonah points out something also very interesting. Who is it that they say they want to attack, that they want to take money from or kill? People who are naki chinam. They are innocent, absolute innocent people. Why? Because the intense hatred of the people who are good, who are righteous, is so strong that even though there's no reason to want to kill them, they want to kill them anyways. Because not only want to kill the person, again, in this concept here, these psukim, they want to wipe out the idea of being a good person. The person who's naki, clean, means literally clean, but it means innocent. So Rabbeinu Yonah tells us that it's the exact opposite of what Shlomo Melech is trying to tell us in his prior psukim. Keep Torah, keep mitzvot, keep minhagim, be a good person, all these things. And the people who are going to try to trip you up are going to say, we should kill people like you. So be aware of that. That's what Rabbeinu Yonah says that. And then he says, If you look here, these words, these three. Utmimim ki yodevo. What does he call here? Let us swallow them alive, whole or complete, like those who go down into the pit. What does that mean? It's a very weird. Usually we say tmimim, someone who's good. Ashrei tmimim derech. We talk about people who are tamim. Yaakov ish tam yoshevo alim. So what does it mean tmimim? It doesn't mean righteous in this case. It doesn't mean that at all. It means someone who's complete in their wealth. So what does this mean? Not only are they going to try and entice you to kill, they're going to entice you to get stuff from somebody. It's not just someone stam, but someone who's filled up with money. They have so much money, they don't even know what to do, especially they have more money than God. We're going to go after those kind of people. And what would be the benefit that you could receive? What's the enticement? I'm not killing the guy. I'm not stealing from him. I'm a bystander. I'm going to be around when this happens. And then I'm going to share in the booty. I'm going to get some of the stuff as well. What would be the harm in that? And that's exactly what he's trying to tell us that we have to be afraid of, be careful of. Rabbeinu Yonah also tells us that this pasuk where we say, Goralcha tapil betochenu, that you should throw your lot in with us. We'll have one common purse, is probably one of the most ridiculous statements. I imagine that you have all seen various movies of thieves and murderers and all kinds of things in whether it's in plays and movies and books. When someone starts to tell you, you don't have to do anything and we're going to split up everything, you almost always know that someone's going to get blown away. Almost always, right? Because now instead of dividing the stuff three ways, you can divide it two ways. So what's the whole reason that someone would try to entice this individual, this potential individual that Shlomo's talking about? What would be the reason? Because if he can not only get rid of somebody, either in the literal or the metaphorical sense, he also has a hashpa'ah, or a heavy negative influence on the person who's doing the actual action. What does this mean? Let me go down here. Let me see if I have this. Oh, very good. So let me go back to this. I'm just putting the slide here. I already read it. Before I get to the next slide, let me explain. I told you I'm only having a couple of slides tonight that have to do with beyond the text. I'd start off by saying that the Malbim says, why does Shlomo start this whole thing with someone saying, oh, they're going to entice you to murder? Not even to do it, just to be there. Everyone knows you don't kill. On that same vein, when the Torah tells us in Parshat Yitro, and then again in Vayetchanan, lo tirtzach, lo tinaf, lo tignov, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal. These are mitzvot sichliot. These are every normal country, city, without even have to pass laws. Already, these are standards of humanity. We have what are known as human rights, zchuyot adam. Just by the dint of being human beings, you have the right to not be accosted and murdered and held against your will. All these other things that go with it. So when the Torah tells us, don't murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, and these are the big things, right? The 10 Commandments. You can say like, duh. Like, I want to minimize the chas v'shalom, but of course not. Maybe that should have been like off to the side. Of course you don't kill. Of course you don't steal. But you have to have them somewhere. So there's a Targum. Most of us are familiar with the Targum Onkelos, who was a ger, who was a convert who translated the Torah into Aramaic and inserted in the Aramaic also various words that were explanations of the word in the Hebrew, but not just a translation. But there's another one called Targum Yonatan ben Uziel. I want you to see, I'm not going to read the whole thing, just the red and the black, dark, okay? What he says on these psukim. Lo tirtzach, it says, don't kill, thou shalt not kill. And he says as follows, Ami b'nei Yisrael. Now, this is obviously not a direct translation. This is a lot of words. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 lines for 2 words. Lo tirtzach, you shall not kill. Ami b'nei Yisrael, my people Israel. Lo tavun ketolim, you should not be murderers. But not just don't be murderers. Lo chavrin v'lo shutafin im ketolim. Neither should you be friends with or even partners with somebody who is a murderer. Lo tinaf, don't commit adultery. Ami b'nei Israel, lo tavun giurin, don't be adulterers. Not only that, lo chavri v'lo shutafin, don't be friends with them, don't be partners with them. Lo tignov, don't steal. Ami b'nei Israel, lo tavun ganavim, don't be thieves. But it's not, most 98% of people we know are not, 99.9% are not murderers. 90, hopefully not more than 99% are not adulterers. Hopefully 95% of being probably generous are not people who steal. Obviously not, but also you shouldn't be partners with them. You shouldn't go into business. You shouldn't be friends with them. You should be neighbors with them. What's Yonatan ben Uziel adding? He's adding exactly what Shlomo HaMelech is telling us here. The person who's being enticed, and again, it's not going to say be a murder, like in this particular series of psukim that Shlomo is reading, telling us, but it can mean anything. You want to live up to this statement in the yellow. Shema b'ni musar avich v'al titosh torat imecha. The Yadar well better be quite aware of people who are surrounding you. You can say, okay, look, the guy who lives next, I'm friends with him. He's not the most honest person in business. He cheats, but look how nice he is to his wife, and look how he davens so beautifully. No. That's exactly what the Yonatan ben Uziel is telling us. It's exactly what Shlomo HaMelech is telling us as well in these psukim. To succumb to these enticements of people who are themselves sinners, even if you don't do anything except be present. Being present in these situations is already very problematic. Go to this next here. Okay. You have another few psukim. I'm going to read and translate, and then I'm going to go back to a few of the words or expressions. Bini. Now, you'll notice this is already the first, second, or third time Shlomo HaMelech is saying Bini. Shema Bini Musar Avicha. We also said over here, Bini Imifatucha, right? The third time now, Shlomo is using the word Bini, Al Telech B'derech Itam. By the way, parenthetical challenge. Who said about whom multiple times in a matter of this thing, two psukim, Bini, many times. Try doing it without looking it up. See if you can figure it out. It's not in Torah, it's in Navi. Anyways, so he's, again, why is Shlomo using this term, Bini? Because again, we're talking from the perspective of a parent talking to a child. We will see the personification of Chokhmah, that shortly, whether we get into it tonight or not, that Chokhmah is a kiviyachol, talk to us. Personification, or ha'anasha, is giving human quality to the inanimate. So we'll talk to us. There'll be times where it'll be the mother talking, sometimes other things. But right now he's talking like a parent to a child. Imagine, if you had whether comfortable or uncomfortable conversations you may have had with your parents when you're little about, son, daughter, listen, we need to talk about X. We need to talk about whatever it is. I can vividly remember when I was learning in yeshiva in high school. My dad, for Alav Shalom, for better or for worse, was the assistant to the dean. And part of his job had him doing a lot of interaction with students, much to my chagrin. When you're 14, 15 years old, your dad is in charge of your friends' discipline and other things. It's not fun. So in any case, there were at that time 3 boys who were thrown out of the yeshiva for smoking marijuana, which today it sounds like a 0, but back then it was a massive offense. And my dad called, I think I was a sophomore, so like 14, 15 years old, whatever. He called me into the living room, he sat me down, and he said, I don't ever, he says, I trust you, et cetera, but I don't ever want to see my face to look like the faces of the parents I had to deal with today. The disappointment, the sadness, how upset they were, besides the fact, of course, it's very dangerous. So, I mean, certain conversation we've all had with our parents over the years, and if you're zocha and lucky enough to still have at least one, if not both parents, even better, they could still have certain conversations. But this is the idea of Shlomo approaching us as the parent talking to us. So he says like this, Beni, al telech b'derech itam. These people are going to come and try and entice you. And it could be any kind of thing. It could be, you know what? Oh, please. Of course you can use your phone on Shabbat. The rabbis don't know what they're talking about. It could be anything. Don't go down their path. It actually means they're route, their road. Minaraglecha minativatam, and keep your feet from their path. So the first word here is derech, which it says don't set out with them. I don't like that translation. I have another one in front of me that says don't walk on the way with them, the derech. And then it says keep your foot away or your feet away from their nativ, from their path. So we'll see, why does he change the wording? It's their way, their path. What's the difference? We'll see. In addition to that, he says, why? Ki raglehem lara yarutzu. For their feet run to do evil. V'maharu lishpoch dam. They're hurrying to shed blood. For those of you who remember that it was Yom Kippur just a couple weeks back, it seems like a long time ago. It's only a couple weeks ago. Ashkenazim say, Saradim actually is not part of the litany in the Al-Ched, but Al-Ched shechatanu levenech beritzat raglaim lehara. I mean, I said enough years to still remember that we say we sin before you with our feet that ran to do bad. Meaning, it's not just that we did an Aveira, not that we did a sin, but we ran, we couldn't wait to do it. He says this is their personality, that they're in a rush to do evil. That's what they're looking to kill. And in the Shpoch Dam, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean just to have to shed blood in the literal sense, but it could be every time we do a sin, we do something wrong, it's a pigiyah, there's a diminution in who we are. Ki chinam mizorah harashet be'inei kol ba'al kanaf. In the eyes of every winged creature, the outspread net means nothing. This I'm going to stop and actually explain before we go back and pick up the other psukim. Picture a bird. Now, birds play a big part in this week's parasha, of course, in Parshat Noach sending out the bird, sending out the next bird. But you're a bird, you're flying around, and you see this big net. You don't think anything of it. Say, oh, whoa, there's a net. We got to be careful. Or you're a fish in the sea. You see a big net. You got to be careful. They don't think that way. This outspread net doesn't mean anything. It says here, the chinam mizorah harashet. This reshet, this this net means nothing to them in the eyes of the winged creature. And they're going to go in there. So a person who goes in to this situation, who's being drawn into the situation, on the surface, it may seem like it's a nothing. But no, it's not a nothing. But they lie in ambush for their own blood. They lie in wait, let me move this up, for their own lives. Kain orchot kol botzei batza et nefesh ba'alav yikach. Let me see if I have it here in English. Here, they lie in wait for their own. Try move this up. Sorry, make it a little bit smaller. Actually, just widen this out. There, they lie in wait for their own lives. What does this mean? Okay, we have to go back now and talk about these couple of psukim. We look at the beginning. Bini. Don't go on their way. So we have here two different expressions. Do not walk on the way with them, which refers to the ambush of the sinners, or suggested by the sinners, and the bloodshed, the plunder, the taking the goods, the guy's stuff. That's the first part. And the second half is restrain your foot from their path, even when it looks like there's when it's a road. I'm going to see what this means. The difference between a road and a path. When it's a road and it's this big deal, they're talking about this, the big, we're going to kill some, we're going to do this. Obviously, don't join with them. But even if it seems marginally legitimate, I have a deal for you. Want you to call your all your friends, and we're gonna put together a package. And when they invest with us, they're going to make a fortune because they're going to get a 17% return on their money. Anyone tells you they're going to guarantee you 17% return on your money, please send them my way. I will be more than happy to not give them 17% return on money and tell them they do. But it's obviously, he says, even when it's the big things or the little things. He uses the word derech here, the massive big things, and the tip of the path, and the small things. But there's another way to look at this. Rabbeinu Yonah, again, tells us what is the difference here when he's talking to the child, to us, saying, don't walk in their path, in their way, and don't go in their path. A derech is a wide paved road. A path is narrower, right? When we see, for example, for those of you here in Malay Adumim, you see we talk about the security path. It's not really a road. It's a path. It's not meant as a road. You shouldn't not only join them in big numbers, Like, oh, yeah, whole group, yeah, I'm Batal Bashishim. What's the difference if I'm there or not? But even if it's just small numbers, maybe even more so when it's just small numbers, stay away from people who want to do these kind of things to you as well. Because when they spread out this net to try and trap you, you are going to be just like that bird, who this outspread net means nothing at all. Um, when a criminal wants to entice you, and I talk about criminal whether they want to do something really bad or just something marginally, quote, marginally bad, um, depending on how good they are. I imagine every one of us somewhere, sometime or another, has been talked into doing something either due to social pressure, peer pressure. It's because, oh, everyone's doing this, whatever it might be. You think back that one of the reasons you may have done something that went against what your parents taught you, teachers taught you, what you felt your own neshama telling you, was you're embarrassed. You're afraid. You don't want to stick out like a sore thumb. You don't want to be. You want to be cool. And the Vilna Gaon actually is telling us, don't be cool. What does that mean? Don't be cool. He didn't use those words, obviously. Said that should never be a reason to do something bad because you don't want to look not cool. Not a good reason. Matter of fact, David HaMelech in more than one place talks about in Parakut Kufya Tet, I believe, a couple of psukim, he talks about the idea that he will not be embarrassed to speak about Hashem's Torah when sitting among the dignitaries of the world. Imagine for a moment the head of the state of Israel. Let's take um, Herzog. Okay, he goes and sits in a summit. Say he goes to the G20, the group of 20 nations, and he starts giving a Devar Torah and Parshat Shavua and talking about God, how Hashem is so wonderful. You think he'd ever do that? Even if he were religious and he were like his grandfather, no, he would not do that because it's not normally what's done. And David HaMelech on the other, just exactly the opposite. He would sit among the dignitaries and kings of other countries, and he would be talking, praising Hashem and talking about Torah. Says that this is one of the lessons also here he tried to tell us from his father, meaning Shlomo's talking about his father, David, that don't ever be afraid to stand by your principles. Remember, this whole section started off with Shema B'ni Musar Avicha. It's not just about minhagim. It's not just about keeping Torah, but it's about making sure you stay true to who you are and what you've been taught. And never to be embarrassed by what you've been taught. Now, there's another word here I want to point out. Actually, it's in the next slide. Get to it. Okay. I'm not going to read the whole thing here. I'm going to read a couple psukim and I'm going to talk about them. So start like from here. This is pasuk kaf. For those of you, if you're on Sefer, your own book, it's in number pasuk 20. Now, I'm not going to get this far, but I just want you to see. I have a note here that says guf rishon. Suddenly, this is going to be chokhmah speaking to us. Actual wisdom is speaking to us in first person, like I chokhmah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but we're not going to get that far tonight. The chokhmot bachutz tarona, wisdom cries aloud in the streets, or chovot titen kola, raises her voice in the square. So one of the things we talked about in the introduction, when we talked about before we actually got into the Sefer, was that there will be a number of things of ha'anasha, or personification, one of which is the words of chokhmah. Wisdom herself cries out in the streets. Wisdom doesn't cry out in the streets. Obviously, wisdom is wisdom. But in a personification way, wisdom cries out in the streets, raises her voice in the squares. Okay, what does this mean? When you have discovered something, I'll give you why this popped into my head. I've asked no idea. I was already an adult when I realized that A, B, C, D, E, F, G is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. Okay? Like, wow. Okay, that's a silly example. Let me give you a real example. I was already an adult. Maybe, even maybe after you made Aliyah, I don't remember, that Yigdal that we say in the morning or in Shabbat at the end of Friday night davening is 13 stanzas, which I always thought was like, kind of weird. Like, why couldn't make it 14 or 12? Make it some even number, because every line of Yigdal is a line corresponding to the 13 Anima Amins, one for one. I didn't know that until many years ago. Like, wow, that's a little piece of wisdom I didn't know before. I didn't know that the Chavetz Chaim, I mentioned this before, my stupidity as a 19-year-old kid, I didn't know the Chavetz Chaim wrote the Mishnah Berurah. A lot of these things I never learned, or maybe I learned it. Wasn't paying attention. Let's give a little credit to my teachers, I guess. But as you grow older, these are little examples. You say like, wow, I really figured out that Mishnah, or that was the hardest math thing I've ever done, and I was able to figure it out. Man, God is so cool. I get whatever it is. Bring God into it, don't bring God into it. It's just there's a joy in learning new things. There's a joy in growth, in your chokhmah, in your wisdom, and not just facts, but understanding how to understand something and how to teach something and how to bring across a point and how to speak, whatever it might be. So that's why you have the word here, b'chokhmot v'chutz taronu. Take that wisdom. It says that the wisdom is like joy, some word rina, of happiness, joy. That's like, go out there and let that wisdom go to the world. And the streets allow it to have a voice. What does that mean? As opposed to robbers. Remember, this is coming on the heels of the other psukim. The robbers aren't going out the street going, hey, who wants to go kill somebody? Who wants to go and plunder someone's house? You go, hey, come here, kid. Right? And they're going to have this little conversation, or they're going to start texting in code or whatever it might be. That's in very hidden, very private, on purpose, very much like the Averah itself. Most people who are quote unquote religious will not outwardly go outside. Let's say a person who uses their phone on Shabbat, they keep Shabbat, but for some reason they can't get rid of their phone on Shabbat. They're going to walk down the street texting on Shabbat. Okay, so they'll go in their room or something, close the door, I would hope. I'm not condoning it, I'm just saying it may happen. But we tend to do things like that privately. Not we, I don't text on Shabbat. But when it comes to the good stuff, that shouldn't be private. When it comes to the good stuff, we want to publicize it. We want to go out there and literally be on the street saying, hey, I heard a great Dvar Torah. Or did you know about this? And it's sharing. And by doing that, instead of sharing, in quotes, with the bad guys and getting yourself into trouble, you're sharing the good stuff, and you're increasing chokhmah, not for yourself only, but for other people as well. Okay, we're going to stop here. This pasuk here, I'm going to mark it so I remember where we got up to. I'll make it bold and save. Great. Okay, that's my story for tonight. Bezat Hashem, it's nice to be back in class. We will continue Bezat Hashem on Sunday next week. For those of you who come to the other classes, we are back in business also. Tuesday night at 7 o'clock is Jewish history, fascinating time period we're coming up to. And Thursday morning, back in person, Bezrat Hashem by the Lifshitz family for Pirkei Avot in chapter 4. Have a wonderful evening. Let's have some good, real good B'sorot Tovot. Since the last time we've spoken, of course, that thank God, Baruch Hashem, Hashem Ki Tov. All of our living hostages are home. We need to get all the ones who are no longer alive. We need to get them back also. And because we can always rely on Hamas to do the wrong thing, it will happen sooner than later. Who knows? All right, Laila Tov, everybody. Shabbat.
Thanks.